way now.
It's a good lead, but I didn't even get to finish my story about the video because
Oh,
we
I
went on
know.
such a tangent. I'll have to come back to that too.
I think our Twitter communications have taken a slight sort of an interesting kind of pivot. Because I've had a couple moments too where nobody knows what we're talking about too, but I've had a couple moments where you tweet something up or you message me or something and it somehow feels like it's speaking directly to the moment that I'm in, but we haven't set it up at all. Does that make sense? Like it's just the right kind of tweet at the right moment. And that actually fits in well with our book conversation as well, like about reading books.
So if we could go back just for a second to the video. Yeah, so you I don't know, Marco Polo'd me. I don't know how you communicated with me, but you're like, hey, it's your last day at school. Are you gonna get a video? Are you gonna put something together? And I was shaking my head, laughing, sweating as I was packing. I'm like, no, I'm not in any space to shoot a video. I mean, not a bad idea. But then what I wanted to come back to was I think I might be going into work tomorrow because I have a video idea. So there might be a video, but it's not catching me in real time packing the room. Because like I told you, I was too busy burning the boats. I had a canister of gasoline in one hand and my lighter in the other. No room for a camera. And I really wish that I had somebody to record for me. Like that would have been a good time to have a video person following me around.
A videographer.
Yeah. And I didn't want to set up my phone that's not where my head was at. Great idea, but not where my head was at. Which then, okay, so now I'm going to pivot to the books. So then my realization when you were talking about just a minute ago about having books that you've read several times or whatever, and you're done, it's time for those books to move on. I was telling you that, for a long time I lived with the idea that I was not a reader and that it wasn't my thing. And then when we started the book club for men and I kind of started reading different types of text on purpose to talk about with the guys, it was like, I'm going to read this book no matter what. Come hell or high water, whether I like it or not, I'm going to read it because we're going to talk about it. I've now shifted to I'm going to start reading books I'm interested in, but I'm only going to read them as long as I'm interested. And then if I lose interest, then I'm just going to stop reading the book. It's simple for me. I mean, it's simple for me. I'm not going to spend my time doing something I don't want to do. Because in life, there are many things I do that I don't want to do, but I can't just stop those things. I mean, I don't think it wouldn't make sense. Like, I go to work one day, I'm not happy with work, so I just stop going to work. That's not an option. For me.
How is this different? What you're suggesting right now, how is it different than how we've learned to read social media, which is kind of like short hits? It's that ludic loop we were chatting about last week. It's just enough to make you feel like you did a thing. And then you take some downtime and you go back and you read another thing. So there's, 280 characters or, checking people's Instas. How is what you're suggesting here? Or is there a connection there? Is there something about how you have retrained your brain, recommitted your brain to reading based on how you consume digital? Is that helping you read books? Because it almost sounds as if it's a slightly more expanded way to look at reading books. Because I would say the same thing. Like what you're saying right now about reading books, I would say that's how I operate on Twitter. I read Twitter until I feel like there's nothing left for me to read, and then I stop. And I may or may not go back to that person. Or is it something different? It sounds like you're sort of finding a functionality in the reading, like a method to functionality that's giving you the satisfaction of becoming a reader. Like you're getting just the right kind of dose of reading. And I really like the idea that we don't have to read whole books. I like that idea. Yeah, and I think it's and sometimes, I was pointing out to, one of the books, the Atomic Habits, the one that I've had for a while, and I've read it. So when I say I've read it, I think I've read it entirely almost twice. but I've read it in a bunch of little hits and fits tons of times. Picking up, I'll just read another part of the chapter. And where I come back to is like that title on the front is really all I needed. Even after I've read it and I've looked at the method and, you know, the suggestion of the tools and the staging and how to sort of get there, making those small changes is the only takeaway for me. And so this book, because I got it when it first came out. I just wanted to get the date on it. I forget when this came out. 2018. So 3 years old-ish. So in 3 years, 1, 2, 3, 4 words is all I needed. Anybody want this one? I'll send it out to you. Atomic Habits. And it was a good book. It was good. I got what I needed from it. But I like that idea of not having to read whole books. I like that. And you are a reader. I think you just found a way. I think you found that was one of the, when you and I were first getting to know each other, that was one of the first sort of declarations that you made about kind of how I think I took it personally, as in you were actually saying something just personal about a preference, but I think it was more in a professional discussion about teaching, that you were talking about the reading that you do. And I think I maybe pushed back, well, don't you do blogs and Twitter and you read there? Because you kind of wholeheartedly said you weren't a reader, or you didn't consider yourself a reader. And I did the teacher thing. What about this? What about comic books? What about blog posts? What about websites? But not really taking into account how you're defining it. You were defining it as in picking up one of these bad boys and sitting down for a stretch, flipping the pages. And actually, you were talking about chapter books. I'm guessing that wasn't the space for you. But yeah, I remember back, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago, that was one of the first things you were sort of defining yourself to me about the way you sort of do your work, and that you weren't a reader. Look at you now. Look at you now. Book club for men.
Yeah, look at me now.
So, one of the things that was just in our on-ramp was talking about, I put out on Twitter the other day just an offer to, I think it was maybe it was a too soon, Clef, too soon. Was it Thursday morning, Wednesday morning? I put out a Twitter Spaces conversation, tagged a few people talking about the come down, and just see where people were at, and trying to see their life without school, without the bells, without the structure. And even this year, if your commute was from, your bed to your shower, to your fridge, to your home office, everybody had a little bit of a structure of the day this past year. And talking about the come down, it was kind of cool. A few people jumped in and they were talking about, there was some of the general statements was more about the not yet knowing what to do with themselves, right? Not yet knowing what to do. That's actually, that whole thing I just said is a total distraction for what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that often at the end of the year, what I would be doing, I asked you about the yard sale table at school, where people just kind of dump their shit and like, hey, go ahead, it's free, take it. Take it. And you've got like a frying pan, a couple books, some VHS tapes, right? Or some book on pedagogy from 20 years ago. But yeah, this whole the Atomic Habits book, I'd be putting it there. I've got a few Atomic Habits. I've got this one too, The Mindful Guide to Conflict Resolution. It's not a bad book, but I'd be putting that on the art sale table. I guess I could do this. I guess I could have a yard sale out front of my house too. But there's something cool about offering it up to your colleagues. I don't know if that's like dumping your garbage, but there was something cool about the idea that you're giving it away to someone else that would have, it's total ego. Someone that would appreciate it in the way that you do. Because I do remember putting a couple books down there, and one teacher ended up using was the type of paper, I forget what it's called. So do you know how some books, is it decaling? No, not decaling. Where some of the books where this part is all fancy chopped, like it's a kind of a textured, like the page edges are. Beth Lyons would know. Jen Brown would know too. I think it's deckling. I think that's what it is. Decking. So it's all the pages have sort of like the top part here is nice and flat, but the ends of the paper, it's like they've been cut with some sort of creative scissors or chewed on by rats, but it's kind of rough. And for me, they're really hard to page turn. But what a teacher wanted it for, I put a couple of books like that, is they actually ripped the pages out of the book and they were doing like redacted poetry with their classes. So each kid would get a page and then they'd have to take a black Sharpie and color out, block out, redact the words in order to create a poem with the actual page. That's kind of funny because, I had a moment like, oh, I thought you're going to read the book, not rip it apart and use it for an art project. And another teacher took a couple books and used it for paper mache. Ultimately, it's paper, right? It's still being used. Can't control how it's being used.
This is what I would do with those books. I would write a little note to someone, and nobody in particular. Just write a note to someone. Place it in or on top of the book and stick it, and then put those books in your car. And the next time you're out and about, and because of COVID, it's a little bit different because, you're not parking your car and going into places as much as you used to. But what I would do is I would probably, and this is kind of ballsy, but kind of cool too. You park your car, you get out, and you see somebody come up to their car close to you, and you, just by looking at them, you might have 3 or 4 books in your trunk, and just by looking at them, you make a connection with one of those books, and you literally pop the trunk, pull the book out, walk up to them, say, "This book's for you." And they look at you, and you're like, "I'm going to just leave this here, read the note. This book is for you," and walk away. And you could do that, or you could just simply place it on someone's windshield or on somebody's driveway and just walk away. And hopefully they read the note and a connection is created, and they take a look at the book or not. It's right up your alley. It seems like something a poet would do, a writer would do, where you personalize this book in a way that's not personal, and then you give it to somebody. Literally, you just give it to somebody, or you leave it somewhere for someone to pick up and be like, "Holy cow, this speaks to me."
I like that. I might steal that. I like that idea. There's I follow Julie Fazuli on Instagram, and she's a multi-talented artist, skateboarder, DJ. I think she's a tattooist. She makes really cool stickers. I think she also makes video and film. She's either a director or a videographer. She's out of Hamilton. And I think it was Julie that was also offering, I could be wrong on this one, but also I think offering some art lessons. It was pre-COVID, to teach little kids how to do graffiti letters. Kind of cool, eh? Mm-hmm. But what Julie will do is art drops. And Julie will put together packages of stickers that's a part of her current catalog, and use just kind of put it up somewhere. Like she's walking downtown, she'll put it on a park bench, kind of like put it on a ledge. Sometimes she kind of gives clues to where she's left behind. So it's a little bit like a little guerrilla marketing, right? You can also check her stuff out on Etsy. She's got really cool stuff. But yeah, it's that similar. I think some artists do that, whether you're a poet or obviously graffiti artists do that all the time. That's a big part of their art drop. The difference being is like it's a installation. It's there on the wall for you to see, but still has a similar surprise factor to it. I like that. So you would try and hand it directly to someone? Like,
Not me, bro. Not me. Just an
oh,
idea in my head, something that you might do. I'm not
mm-hmm,
I'm not going near anybody. My style is more here's my style. This is what just came to my mind when you said that.
mm-hmm.
There is a little there is a little neighborhood main street close to my work. It's called Belmont Village, and it's not a very long street, and maybe there's a whack of shops on either side of the street. I would literally walk up to they've got now picnic tables along that whole strip for people to grab something to eat and sit outside. I would literally be walking down Belmont Village and just leave it on a picnic table. Keep walking. That's what
I
I would.
like it.
I just plant it and leave. Um, but I mean, it's COVID, so like, COVID's done something to me. So if I'm in Belmont Village and I
Mhm.
head over to the donut shop, grab a donut, and then go outside to sit on a at a picnic table with my donut, and I see somebody left a book there, I'm not going to start flipping through the book.
No way.
I'm not now. No. Um, but other people will. Not everybody's like me. Other people will. So that's what I would do. I would leave a little note, dear human. I this book has brought me some pleasure around this or that. I think it can help you. Check it out. And if P.S. If it doesn't work for you and you know somebody that it might work for, pass it on to them. Stay safe.
Karen, yeah, that's awesome. Karen and I had talked about whether or not we were going to put a little library hanging from. We have a tree out on the boulevard,
Hmm.
and I could probably figure out a way to either build or buy a closable box that I would just sort of hang from the branches somehow. There's a good kind of yoke on the tree that's fairly low, so I could just put a loop around it and hang it there and put our extra books out in it. Um, Funny story about giving away books. When we first moved into the house, we went through a cleaning out kind of phase, and I put together this 2 big crates of books, and there's a bunch of different stuff in there. Karen had put some stuff in there. I think there was stuff already in the crates, like books that we had already checked out. And it's funny. This is a very pre-COVID story. We're gonna start having these, eh? The nostalgia of the pre-COVID stories. So I just roll up to there's a long-term care house kind of close to actually where you and I went downtown for the bao sandwiches. Pretty close to that, within walking distance. And I just rolled up, went up, walked in the front door. Someone was sitting at the reception desk. I was like, hey, I got some books I'd like to donate for your library. And they're like, sure, bring them in. So I just bring in the 2 crates. And they said, okay, give me about 20 minutes. I'll go through them right now. And as I'm standing there, the individual starts looking through the books, just kind of pawing through the books, like no pause, no nothing. Like, oh, and like they're getting some joy out of like, oh, these are cool. These are some fun books. He said, can give us about 20 minutes. You can come back and pick up your crates. And so I went again downtown, where just kind of went for a walk. Really, I left my car parked in their parking lot. Just walked downtown for a little bit, and then came back. And it was funny. Yeah, we took all of them, but you can have this one back. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, that's kind of random that there'd only be one that didn't work. But it was that thick pre-baby book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. And again, the person behind the counter, she's like, yeah, I don't think we'll be needing this one. She holds it up and she does this with her arm, and she kind of sort of points to the individuals, and the individuals all sitting around. There's a game place, people sitting having coffee. I would say probably the average age was like 65, 70. And it was just kind of funny. Do you know this book? It's What to Expect When You're Expecting. So this was the book that the textbook that we needed to read when we were expecting our first child. So that was kind of funny. But that book, I don't even know where that book went. I think I just did a Salvation Army donation on that one.
That's a book that you leave on the staff room table at school because you're not going to use it, but there's a handful of people that might.
Yep, there's always the new fams, the new peeps that are making new peeps. So just funny, giving away books. Kind of missed the mark on that one. And just a funny slice of life story. Like, yeah, I don't think we need this one. Although I guess they could have argued, you know, there's likely some grandparents in there. They could have passed it along to somebody. Mm-hmm. But talk about pre-COVID, eh? Like just being able to walk into a long-term care home and just walk right up to reception. No appointment, no mask, no nothing. They just open up the box of books and start leafing through it, deciding whether or not they want them.
This is crazy because there is an old age home, retirement home, whatever you want to call it, just up the street. I walk past it every day. And the one day I was walking, I thought, same things you, like, how different if pre-COVID, well, this wouldn't have been an issue pre-COVID, because here's one of the biggest things that stands out for me with this whole COVID thing is my 15-year-old son's in high school, and we had set up so many different, we had thought of and we're talking with him about so many different ideas about where he could volunteer his time, where he could go and do something helpful for other people. And every time I walk past that place, it kills me that if COVID was not part of our world, he and I could possibly be in that building doing something to help out in a volunteer way. And that is it is one of the things that makes me so sad about all this COVID. Like, we had stuff for both the kids that they were supposed to do to help make them better people. And then COVID hit and everything, the pause button was hit on everything. And I feel like Ontario's having a really hard time unpausing everything. Like, and especially my region. Basically all of Ontario's moved on except Waterloo region. And it's like, I just shake my head that so much time has passed and stuff that I'll share with you, but I can't share. Or no, that's not true. I could share it on the podcast, but I don't want to. About things that, like, the way life is supposed to go and how it's not going because of COVID and the way COVID operates is like, I'm tired of it. It's gotten old. It's old now. I'm tired of it. This is our first episode of summer school, so I feel like ever since school ended, I've been just on total relax mode, and not like on purpose. I just feel like I don't want to give my energy to anything right now except sitting around doing nothing. And so when I do that, I've got lots of time to think. And these are some of the things I've been thinking about, especially I'm connecting the dots. You say what you said, and then me thinking, yeah, every time I walk past the retirement residence, because I walk past it every time I go for a walk, I just shake my head. And I think of the possibilities that are not available to us right now, and the people inside the building. Like, I'm sure they would love to have people in there helping out, volunteering to sit and talk with you, read to you, like, just things, you know? And it's funny because because I live so close to the residence, when I'm out on my walk, I see people from the residence out on a walk. And I know who they are. You can spot them a mile away, the way they're dressed, and they don't go very far, right? Like, they don't venture off too far from the residence just because if something were to happen or whatever, they need to get back. But I just think, wouldn't it be cool if my 15-year-old son volunteered to go on walks with people, you know? That'd be so cool. Outside, walking and talking. And the things he'd learn from these people who have lived lives, and he's just starting his. That stuff's starting to get on my nerves, Clough. I'm going to need to hit some Fortnite to distract myself.
Yeah, you kind of touched on an interesting that conversation about social learning, particularly in my family, has popped up as the importance of connecting and learning from family members, and sort of seeing. We haven't done a really great job in our family of kind of keeping our kids connected with cousins and extended family. And sort of contributing to a deeper understanding of the family knowledge. And I think it's probably something there's a reckoning coming up soon, as far as having to sort of, I guess, do a better job of promoting what that means. Like, just really pushing our kids and pushing ourselves to sort of reconnect with the family. But you talking about learning from the elders, learning from individuals that are in your community, and how that is very much, it's a really great reciprocal relationship. Like, you might be getting your community service hours, but you're growing as a young person, and also contributing to the wellness of another. So yeah, you got me thinking about the work that I have to do there, and how not great I am at it. Sometimes I get a little too ridiculously braggy of just moving forward and learning forward. I don't pause and spend a lot of time in the past. But I understand, at least in my own family, there's parts of my family that if I don't, the cost would be that if I don't intentionally connect my kids to those other individuals in my family and start building that relationship, it's going to be similar to how it was when I was growing up, and how when I grew up, there were parts of my family that my immediate family unit just didn't spend a lot of time with. And you sort of learn, in the same way you can learn to be around people, you can also learn to not be around people. That's actually I think my strongest concern going back into September is how we've learned to not be around people, and maybe arriving back in the spaces and not really feeling the pull of the pre-COVID stories, because everyone's COVID stories are going to be the most immediate memory that kind of launches us into the next school year. I don't know. Is there going to be any space for people to say, remember when? And they're sort of saying that as a response to an immediate protocol that's tagged in 3 years ago, where we did something different. And it's what's interesting about that is that there's things I think about some of the safety protocols moving forward into school in September that we will rationalize and say it's kind of good to keep these, like even the conversation right now about wearing masks in September. And I think you and I landed on that. If in September your board says you don't have to wear a mask, will you wear a mask? And I would be curious why. Like, what is the thing that's it's being rhetorical, but like, what, each of us would have a different reason why. But for some people, there's zero reason to wear a mask. There is zero reason. They might. I don't know. Like, I guess it becomes all the connections. Like, if I were, and I am vaxxed, and I didn't have anybody else living in the house that would be have a fragile immune system. I don't know. I'm bouncing all over the place here. Moving into September, what we've learned, how firm will we be, and how we've learned to be away from each other. In September, what will be some of the rules that we'll still need to follow? And the thing that you started with, like, there's been a real cost in the social learning. Like we've had an interruption in how we learn socially with other people, from other people, um, for other people. And in some cases, I think it's led to a real take for grantedness, right? Um, yeah, that was a messy response, or even just not even really a response, just a whole lot of babble on what you said. You lit me up about the elders thing, though.
I just feel like there's such a vast amount of life experience and knowledge living in that building.
Mm.
And I kind of feel for them too, because, they've probably been locked in that place in a way for this amount of time, staying safe, following protocols, just like the rest of us. I don't know. I don't like getting too caught up in the past. I do, but I can't help but consider what you're talking about, the social learning from others. So last night, um, I said to my wife, like, what do you want to do for dinner? And she was in the mood. You're going to love this because it fits with something you and I have been talking about personally. Um, she wanted to go out and get food from a place and then sit outside and eat it somewhere. And I would say that this is the first time since this pandemic has started that my wife has had the idea of, like, let's leave the house together, all four of us, go somewhere where we can go into a place, order our food, and then go outside and eat it. I know it sounds like everybody's like, who cares? Well, for my family, it's a big deal because since the pandemic started, it's been, if we eat out, it's I'll go pick it up and bring it back, or it will be delivered to our house and we will eat it in our house and we won't consider going anywhere to get it. One of us would go do that. But she was in the mood for there's this really cool place here in Uptown Waterloo. It's one of those can't remember. I think it's called Score Pizza, where you go in and you basically, it's unlimited toppings and you choose what you want on your pizza and they cook your pizza and then they either put it in a box and send you on your way, or you can sit on their patio and eat it. And we went in, so we haven't done anything like this since before the pandemic. And this is my wife's idea, and my wife is the one who's been very on the ball with the protocols, let's say. And we go into this place and there's nobody else there, which is great. We order our food, and then as the food's being cooked, we're debating, do we eat right outside on their patio, which would be like monumental for my family, or do we just grab it? And there was a public space down the street, and the city had put picnic tables all over this public space so that people can sit with their family and do whatever, right? Break, eat, whatever, in your own little bubble. And I'm like, you know what? I think we should just stay and eat on the patio. Like, we should just sit on the patio. There's nobody here, and sit as a family and have gone out for dinner for the first time since all of this started. So my wife talks to one of the girls working there and says, is it okay if we is it okay if we sit on the patio? And the lady's like, of course, I will go and I will clean. I'll set up a table of four and I will disinfect the whole thing just because, which is right up my wife's alley. So lady goes out there, puts these two little tables together, four chairs, cleans the thing like nobody's business. And we find 10 minutes later, we find ourselves sitting together as a family at a restaurant, which is the weirdest thing for me to tell you that we did, because you and I have been having these conversations outside of a restaurant in Uptown Waterloo on what seemingly is normally a busy street. It's quiet though. I mean, it's not really busy the way it used to be, but it's quiet and we're eating our dinner, and it was weird because it felt normal, but at the same time,
I
it felt completely abnormal. I was like,
like that. It felt weird because it was normal.
right. Um, it was old normal. That's why I felt weird, because it was eerie. It was like, we've done this before. We used to do this once a week, every week for the longest time. And we're just, it was weird. It was weird because, and even when my wife said, let's go out, I'm like, we're all going to go get food? Because normally it's, tell me what we're getting. You guys
Mhm.
order it. I'll go pick it up when it's time to go pick it up. Like that has been the routine for, a long time. And it was her idea, and she's been Captain COVID the whole time. Like she's been the one who's been very careful with everything, and kind of, I'm not as careful. So she reminds me of what to do to be careful, and she's been very good at that. And then she's the one that broke the mold, which is kind of, it's appropriate because it just, the whole thing was weird that my wife was going in this direction, that we all ate outside at a restaurant like we used to do. The banter, like when we were in the car driving to the restaurant, the boys were in the back seat doing what they did over a year ago, which pisses us off, the way that they kind of fight and pick at each other. And as we're driving, I'm like, I didn't miss that. I didn't miss the two of them in the back seat causing difficulty for us in the front seat. And my wife laughed. I'm like, this hasn't happened in such a long time. Um, it was strange because that used to be our normal. It was strange. And then after we ate dinner, there's a 4 All ice cream place up the street. My wife loves 4 All ice cream. So we walk up the street, and there wasn't a long line to get in, but we got our ice cream and came out. And as we're outside on the sidewalk, we look over across the street, and there's a spin class going on right outside. There's like 15 people on bikes, and they're doing their spin class. And there's nothing to see on this street except that. So if you can imagine, there are people lined up and down the street eating their ice cream, staring at these women
Observing us, yeah.
riding their bikes and watching the leader yell and scream and do her motivational speech as these people, they were females, were riding their spin bikes or whatever. And I was like, I finished my ice cream. I said, can we go now? Like I had had enough. I had had enough of being out in the world. I'm like, can we go? The mask, one loop was around my ear as I was eating my ice cream. I got beer and brownies was the name of this ice cream, and it was pretty good. Yeah, can we go home now? I was that guy. So we went home, and it was just weird.
You got I'm wondering about, so the last staff meeting that we had, there was a lot of people at the staff meeting because, virtual, and there's individuals there that had been away at virtual secondary. So we got to see, in some cases, not everybody put their cameras up, but that statement about being in the world and of having had enough, like you've had enough of being in the world, like sort of out in public spaces. I was thinking about that, what it'll be like for the individuals that were at virtual schools and are now coming back into the classrooms. And I mean that on a I guess personal, professional, just on a social level. So for those of us, and I mean, you were in the classroom a lot longer than I was, but I was also teaching. Like I didn't opt to go to virtual high school. I stayed in the face-to-face school, and then we kind of did the flip-flop back and forth. The individuals that went to virtual had a fairly consistent last year. Like their experience in the last year was very consistent. They didn't have the, of course, there's the challenges of converting your pedagogy, converting your daily life to the virtual. I feel like I got more than enough of a taste of that just from in our hybrid, having being flipped to teaching from home in April. But I wonder about the individuals that started to regrow or maybe trim some of the connections about teaching and what it'll be like for them to, because I don't know exactly how it's going to roll, because previously when we went into this past school year, teachers could apply to teach at virtual school. So you could just put your name in if you wanted to be a virtual school teachers. And for a lot of reasons, teachers did that. They decided that it would be better for them to teach from home. Probably, their personal health reasons to family reasons to just thinking, what, I just don't want the inconvenience of flipping back and forth. I want my consistent year. Tons of different reasons on how to do it. Now, though, I'm thinking about how there isn't that option going. There isn't that option yet where you can voluntarily say that you want to be a virtual teacher. So we're moving back into September without the option to teach virtually, let's say on compassionate grounds, which is kind of like how some people worked it. Like it's not safe for me. I don't want to be back in the school, and everyone's going to be back in the schools. The difference being is that you're going to be teaching virtually and face-to-face at the same time, but still you're going to be back in the world. We're going to be back in the world of teaching. And I'm not doing much other than stating the obvious. Other people have other jurisdictions have already done this with the hybrid teaching, but I think to myself about the individuals that are wrestling with this idea now that they have to be back with students again. I can remember last year you and I talking and me saying, I think you said it too, talking about like the virtual school, they're not going to build this infrastructure and let it go away. Right. I did at the time, I didn't think that what they would do is just roll it back into the schools. Like I didn't think we knew that there would be, because our school, there's still the option that students can choose. They can do virtual, but they're going to be taught by their own teachers at their own homeschool. My perspective was like, somehow they were going to keep the virtual school option, like students would go away to that. I hadn't even thought like teachers in their own schools would be teaching virtual at the same time. I thought of it later. But anyways, yeah, it's just, I'm thinking about the individuals that, are now contending with having to be back in the school. Wondering if they're having some feels around those challenges. And if anyone, when they actually arrive back in the school, will be like, oh, crap, I forgot what this was like. Because a year is a long time, even in the course of a career. Like a year is enough time to habit change. Mr. Clear believes so. Like a year is a long time, right? So, you're doing one little change each day, but you have also, if you reinforce one change each day, that becomes habit. So that'll be fascinating. I'm looking forward to those conversations with my staff, because those are that feels like really kind of meaty or dense kind of conversations to have. What's it like to be back in there? And it's back in the world by enforcement. This isn't optional. Your contract says now you have to be in the building. And that brings other things to sort of like into interest. So if we're back in the building, so does that mean face-to-face staff meetings again? Does that mean staff meetings or meetings scheduled without digital in mind? Lots of really fascinating switch-ups for next year.
So in my school board, we still have elementary virtual school. And it was funny watching the system try to staff it. So in our postings, in our first transfer posting process, we saw a whole whack, all the positions that were available at the elementary virtual school. You know, they needed 3 grade 2 teachers, 3 grade 3 teachers, like the list went on and on. And then in the second posting, we saw that there were still some open spots for virtual. So in my board, I don't know about your board, but we're still doing, the virtual school is still available and will be running for elementary. But then I wonder, what does that look like next year at this time? What will the postings be like then? Will people have decided to leave the virtual school as teachers? I don't know. I don't know if they, you remember I told you in my board, when you post out, it's a 2-year commitment unless otherwise stated.
That's awesome. That, yeah, I remember you saying, I was like, what?
I wonder if there was an asterisk there, because I didn't read it carefully, because who knows if it's still going to be needed after next year the way it is now. And I wonder if those teachers are allowed to post out next spring. I don't know. I'd have to look up the posting. But yeah, lots of positions. I know at my school, 30 families identified that they would not be returning to the elementary school, that they will be going virtual. And so we lost a class because of that. The repercussions of all that as well. This year, lots of teachers, low person was on the totem pole. They were the ones to go. They had a classroom, or were getting a classroom in the building. And then, we looked at every school looked at their numbers and was like, no, we're losing this many kids. That means we're losing this many classes. That means this many teachers are not going to be here in real life. They're going remote because there's nowhere else for them to go. And that shifted. That shifted this spring to where now all these jobs were posted. And I know for health reasons that some teachers will remain at the virtual school because of health concerns, because we're not out of the woods yet with all this COVID stuff. It's starting, we're starting to move in that direction, but we're not out of the woods. But just the whole thing's fascinating. I remember people saying to me, are you going to apply to work virtual? And I'm like, no. They're like, why? And I'm like, because the virtual I was doing to end this school year was different than the virtual that the virtual school is doing. Because when you go to virtual school, there are rules, regulations, and policies that apply because that's their norm. Whereas in my situation, it was not the norm for me to be virtual. It was just a safety precaution. It's not the everyday standard. And because of that, there are differences in the way we operate. Man, this whole thing, it's just thinking about it and reliving it is so weird. So weird.
We still have virtual. It's just
elementary.
Yeah, both.
Okay.
But the way my board is doing it is that, so I don't know when it is. Maybe in August they're going to be surveying the student. So secondary, every kid has picked their courses. So course selection is done. They've staffed. So I have my schedule for September. I know what I'm going to be teaching. What I don't know is what the distribution will be in my classes of students that are taking the courses I'm teaching virtually or face-to-face. So that survey will be going out to I think the families in August sometime. So your son would get a survey saying, okay, here's your schedule. Do you want to be in virtual school of your schedule or face-to-face version of your schedule? And if you say virtual, and this is the whole, in our board, there's, just to clarify the way the board is doing is that the hybrid, from the family's point of view, it's not as clear what hybrid is from the family's point of view, because the families are only going to really, all they're really being told is or being asked, do you want virtual school or do you want face-to-face school? And there is chatter around there that the model is changing for September, but I get the sense that it isn't entirely clear, because last year that question meant that if your child chose to, okay, so let's say your child's going into grade 10 at the time. If your child chose face-to-face, they'd be going back to the building that they were in for grade 9. If they chose virtual, they were tied through the information system to their home school, but they were being taught at a different virtual location than their home school by a school that was virtual, completely, internet based, with a different staff, a different administration, and in some cases different kind of rules of engagement. But I mean, it was still our board, so much of it was the same. But as far as the hours, the hours of school, slightly different. So this year, though, there hasn't been as clear delineation that virtual school this year is different than last year. And this is one of the challenges that in trying to build some capacity for support, where the hybrid is challenging, because the hybrid in class means that you're teaching to kids that are in virtual and in front of you at the same time. The kids in the class only know where they are. Like their only experience will be, okay, I'm face to face with the teacher, but this is kind of weird. Like I don't feel the exact focus on me that I used to have, because part of the time the teacher's going to be focused on the virtual kids. And the virtual kids are going to be like, okay, well, this is obviously class, but it's a little bit weird because it's not the same experience as virtual school from last year, where everybody was virtual, right? So for example, your son logs on to a Google Meet, there might only be 3 kids in the Google Meet all the time. And the other 30 kids are actually face-to-face in the classroom. So these, as far as the virtual, and this is similar in elementary, it's the same thing that's happening in elementary. But this is definitely the, I think I'm going to, because I want to start the conversation sooner than later. So I'm going to start talking with my colleagues and offer up, kind of like how I did the come down on Twitter. I want to connect with my colleagues and say, how can we start building some kind of cool thinking? And you know what it is? It's the transitional thinking, to be able to come back from our 2 separate styles of school from last year, to be able to all be back in the classroom again and start to kind of work through the implications of that. Last semester, I think I told you I was doing that lesson lab, where once a week it was my way to kind of share out spec ed tools. But I want to do something similar, where we start to talk about how do we start to build efficacy and feel good about coming back into the classroom again in September. Because I know for me, I'll complain. I'll be a complainer. I'll be someone that's like, I have issues. I have issues, but I also want to be a part of conversations that feel generative, because we do, again, there's no option in September. There's no option anymore. We are back in the classroom. For us, we're back in the classroom.
So your school board, you're telling me they don't have, so in elementary, it's hybrid as well?
Yep.
Okay, see, we've opted not to do that in my board. So in my board, we still have the virtual school. So if you said, and we had to do this survey now because we would never be able to staff it properly later. Mm-hmm. We asked our parents in March, what are your plans for next year? And they told us, and then we staffed accordingly. So our elementary, K to 8, if you said virtual, then you will be in a virtual classroom with your own virtual teacher who will be teaching everybody virtually for that year. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad they did that, because I have no idea how I would do. I don't know how I would do a hybrid. I have no idea how I would teach. Well, I guess I just wouldn't be effective, because I don't know how I would be effective to the kids sitting in front of me and then the kids not sitting in front of me. I know you and I have talked about, like, you've got some ideas. You've got some some space in your brain that's dedicated to making that hybrid experience the best possible learning experience for your kids. I'm glad that I don't have to put my head there, because I just don't know how I would do it. Mind you, we'd figure it out because everybody would be doing it. So there's no choice in the matter. But in my school board, I believe that they did the right thing by keeping the virtual school moving. So that, hey, you decide you're going to go virtual. Awesome. Mr. Jones is your virtual grade 3 teacher for the entire school year. You will report to his Google Classroom every morning, log into his meets, and that's how you're going to do school next year. It's wild. You're telling me your kids at home, I'm assuming they're going to school. Like
my own children?
Yeah, brick and mortar.
My own children are going brick and mortar. Yep.
So as they're sitting in their brick and mortar school, there Mr. Jones will be teaching them in front of them and a bunch of kids that are online, correct?
Yep, correct.
Wow, Mr. Jones. Good luck.
Now, could change. It could change. And there's always that, because we're seeing boards around us flip-flopping that said that they were going to do the same hybrid style. We could see them flip-flopping. So it could change, but that's what we're moving ahead with right now for September.
But this nonsense of it could change is a disaster waiting to happen because of staffing. We all know how long it takes to timetable a high school. We all know about what staffing, how hard it is to staff. I mean, it took them months to staff the virtual school here because they were always needing more teachers, and they didn't have enough teachers to staff it.
Yeah, they already have the I think they already have the methods, though, because you suffer through it once, and then you figure out how to do it quicker afterwards. And then there's always the I guess the seniority list option, as in you sort of ask for volunteers, and then you start to say, okay, well, we're actually, and I don't know, I'm the total guessing, but let's say they flip it and they say, okay, we're going to do a dual system here. I guess what they could do is reopen the staffing cycle again and sort of say, well, we know, okay, so here's where the board has a leg up. There is, I guess, the possibility that you and I, let's say we're both history teachers, that your sections of history, grade 10 history, that you have one section that has entirely every student in it is only doing virtual. That is a possibility, right? In the same way, it is a possibility that you could have one whole section of students that are all virtual, and then your other section of the grade 10 history is all face-to-face. Every single student, according to their schedule and according to how it's scheduled for you, all those students in there are all face-to-face. So it can happen. So this is another kind of interesting phenomenon that would happen, moving forward, is that there are some teachers, we don't know what our distribution is. We won't know what our actual ratio is of students taking virtual versus students taking actual in the exact same section of class. We won't know that until late August. So what we have learned about virtual, you've learned this, I've learned this. It's not exactly the same course design. Not really. Like when you're trying to think of how you're going to build a course for an entirely virtual crew, it's not, I don't think it's fundamentally different, but I think there's different tools that you're obviously going to use. So if there's different tools you're going to want to use, you want to practice using those tools. So there could be some teachers that did not want to be a part of virtual school at all. They want to do face-to-face, and they could have a section of entirely face-to-face students. Could have a whole section of virtual students. And those virtual students, it might not be the best course to actually have virtual students in. So for example, a course like tech. So you have a class of students taking tech. Let's just pick a number. 75% of them are virtual. 25% are right there in front of you. Okay, kids, we're going to change a tire today in auto. Go grab the tools from one of your parents' toolbox. Go out and hit up their car. I'm totally that. I laugh. I don't think it's funny, but this is the space that we're kind of in, right? Because there's the other part to this going into September as well, is that there will be an expectation that we learn something from this past year and do it better. Like we don't get to have the exact same complaints and challenges that we had this past year. We don't have a right to sit on those. Because in some ways, if we're reintroduced, I think this is kind of like sometimes my frustration with teacher Twitter, is that it feels like some of the conversations that are happening around pedagogy moving into September are the exact same conversations that were happening last August. And I just think to myself, like, where was your data set? Like, where did you move this forward? You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like we're going to be given much space to sort of say, use any of the reasons for not teaching well this September. I don't think will apply. Not like they did last year, because we've had a year of training, right? We're now in our second year of having to figure out digital school, albeit now digital school and actual school face-to-face. But I want to pivot. Because a lot of this that we're talking about doesn't directly apply to you. The symptoms or the ineffective side of delivering the good stuff in these 2 years will apply to you. Do you want to talk to that at all? You moving forward in September? Because it hasn't popped up yet, but we're creeping up on the hour mark here. And I'm curious about...
We're over the hour.
We're over the, yeah, you're right, 101. I'm curious about your thinking in September. What are you going to be stealing from the past year to lens the work that you're doing in September?
So in September, I will not be in the classroom. There was a really cool posting called Re-Engagement Teacher, and there's they hired 2 people for this position, and there's a social worker involved as well. So come September, I'm me, another teacher, and a social worker, and I guess there'll be a bigger team than that. We are tasked with the job of identifying, engaging, and supporting students who have become disengaged because of the pandemic and because of remote learning. So with whatever's happening with the pandemic, I'm not going to be in a classroom with a group of kids teaching them from September to June. It's a 1 year, they made it a 1 year position with the guarantee that I get my job back at my school that I'm currently at. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. And what am I going to be taking from this last year?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, dude. Well, the care and compassion that existed, and the mindset that we need to be open, and we need to be iterative and okay with our process as we go through it. Those are the things I'm taking with me, because while the rest of the system moves forward with whatever that looks like, I think I'm going to be stuck a little bit in the past with kids who have decided for whatever reason, or maybe that's not fair. The word decide is not fair. Students who have fallen off the EDU wagon for a number of different reasons. I'm going to be living in that time with them. I don't know what it looks like. All I know is I'm going to be working with kids and families who press pause, and maybe the play button doesn't work anymore for whatever reason. And I need to find a way to get the play button to work. So I don't get to leave. I don't get to leave COVID behind yet. But, to be honest with you, I'm going to end up, I would be in a classroom wearing a mask for probably all of next year anyway. So this coming year, I get to wear a mask. I guess when I'm exposed to people and when I'm driving from one place to the other, I get to take my mask off. I'm a little bit excited about that. Um, I've left the elementary panel. Well, not really, but I'm now living in the intermediate senior panel in my new role. I'm working with grades 7 to 12, and it's not a teaching position. So I'm not in a classroom. I'm not standing in front of a group of people actually teaching curriculum. I'm uh, I'm kind of going back to old school, the work that I used to do before I became a classroom teacher. My first year of education was working as a guidance counselor in adult high school. And I wasn't teaching classes, I was counseling students, career paths, academic path, personal counseling. It looks like I'm going to be flexing those muscles again this coming year. So that's what's happening to me. So I'm still living, I think, inside COVID-19 pandemic because
Mhm.
I will be connected with people who, once it hit or when we were well into the pandemic, they decided that they were done with school. So I'm kind of going to be living in the past a little bit, trying to figure out how to get kids back into school or re-engage somehow with the education system.
It's fascinating because my board has had um, a similar consultancy or support system. Call it consultancy, I guess. We've had that for a while. It's interesting the conditions that can lead to creating student success programming. So ours obviously was not, York Region Board, it was not a response to COVID. Disengagement for a lot of reasons, but not specifically following a pandemic. I'm eager to hear about how layered the work will be for you, and in discovering and connecting with some students that it wasn't actually COVID. COVID just gave you the lens to see the kid, right? Or maybe the funds, the rationale to start reaching out, for your board to start reaching out in this way. And it's also interesting that for now it's a 1 year, because it strikes me this is an ongoing challenge. I would expect this is an ongoing challenge in any school board re-engagement. And any student that would be an early school leaver, where they haven't completed their credits or they haven't effectively transitioned into independent living. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about how those stories emerge and the complexity of it. To ask the question, how can I help? I think the agility and the sort of agility and dexterity and flexibility of a board, I think you are going to be a massive, like how limber will your position have to be, because you're going to be sort of bent and stretched in ways that the board may not have had to consider in the past, especially if some of the data that emerges is that this isn't specific to COVID. It's just COVID that allows us to capture, like we've created an obvious enough data point that we can actually start to see that students are disengaged. So yeah, and part of it is that I love it, from the beginning, you mentioning that this was a possibility, me saying, do it, like what you're the view you're going to get and the projects that you're going to get connected into is so valuable just in the kind of figuring out the bigger story of EDU. I love that it's sort of like the chapters of the story that you never got to read because you were in elementary, so the students were sort of passed off to other. I wonder about the moment when you're looking at the list of re-engagement. You look at that, your list of students, you're like, oh shit, I know this kid. I've worked with this student in the past. And you end up have a now and then connection, right? Like you start to see, wow, the system didn't continue to support them in a way that was, positive for them. It's going to be such a rich experience. And, what you bring to it, your lens, your previous work, your interest in tech, your student advocacy, your critical thinking, your reflective practice, the edge, even your edge that you got, like how you sort of being able to push back, feedback, and even sometimes talk back. Like those are sort of the pillars of doing that professionally managed position. So I'm envious. I would love to do that work again. I love the work I'm doing now, but I really love doing that work too. I love doing that work and the connection with the families and going to multi-school and meeting new leaders and just seeing all the different ways that I used to think, back in Access when I was doing that program with suspension and expulsion, a student would arrive, two different students arrive trying to sort of work on the exact same course, and they have almost the exact same assignment, and looking at the way that two different schools and school cultures create a task, it becomes kaleidoscopic. You're like, how did this one get to this one? And how did this one get to this one? Like, it's cool stuff to see. And it's the type of information that most educators never have access to. Teachers very rarely are actively engaged in the connective tissue between schools. It just doesn't happen. You end up staying in your school and you think that's the world and EDU. And the moment you sort of get outside of your, I think in a lot of ways, your digital connections and the way that you move through your digital spaces will really help you in making these multiple different connections and relationships that you'll need to have at different schools. And understanding that a large chunk of this is going to be made through digital mediums. So being able to connect well through email, connect well through voice calls, connect well through whatever Google Meet stuff. You have a fluency there. So I'm jelly. I'm so jelly.
I'm excited for the perspectives that I've been able to get over the years that I didn't have when I first started this type of work back in the day, right? So back in the day, this is how I started. And then being in the classroom for, 19, 20 years, I'm looking forward to leaning on my experiences and my learning over the last 20 years to help propel me, I guess, as I start this new and exciting role that doesn't really there is no mold for it yet, right? Because it's new for us. It's never been done. Nobody really knows what it's supposed to look like. So it's really cool to have a vision in my mind that is as valid as anybody else's vision because nothing's been done with this yet. I'm looking forward to being back on the fringes. Because I've been at the center of education for so long, the typical classroom teacher, brick and mortar elementary school, that's been my world. But as I've lived in that world, I've leaned on the things I learned in my first year. I've leaned on the learning and the experience that I got of doing a master's degree in counseling, right? Like that skill set has not gone away. It's just been used. It's been used in all kinds of different ways to make connections with people, to communicate, to listen. That's one thing that is so underrated is listening to people. I have found in my time working with humans that sometimes all they want you to do is listen to them. They don't want anything else. They just want you to listen. Because we live in a world that is so fast paced, that is so it can be all about me, 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 that people are not heard. It just stands out for some reason. People just want to be heard. And I hate to say it, but it's, the first thing I learned in my graduate education. Keep your mouth shut and listen. So we'll see where this goes, but um another thing that stands out is this position seems to provide me as a professional with the opportunity to do all the things that are so difficult for me to do in a classroom with 20 kids in it.
Mhm.
Is to be more than a teacher. It's funny because this position is called re-engagement teacher, but I have a feeling I'm going to get to do all the things that I can't or couldn't do effectively as a classroom teacher. I said it in my interview. You know, when you're in a classroom with 22, 23 kids and there's a problem, it's like, okay, we're going to get to your problem, but right now, numeracy is the focus, or literacy is the focus, or this is happening or that's happening. And it's like the time to deal with the problem and to counsel the child and to listen to the child and to explore how to move forward with the child, all those things, they're not front and center. I mean, they should be, but they're not, because there's so many other things that have to happen. Whereas I see this new role as none of those other things matter. The only thing that matters is the person in front of me and what they have to say and their problem. And then slowly I'm hoping we can build the supports and the structures in place to make numeracy and literacy and whatever else be part of that person's world again. So instead of it being, oh, no, I see you have a problem, but first I need to tear down the numeracy and literacy walls. Now I see it as, oh, let's deal with your problem and then start building around that problem to create solutions. It really is, in my mind, it's quite like philosophical and abstract, but I think it is because I've had now an experience of working at the heart of education. I call it the heart, but now moving back out to the fringes with people who have been left or forgotten or walked away, and the system didn't have a lot of ways to reach out and bring them back in. So I'm looking forward to that. Um, I'm feeling right now more excitement than fear with the unknown. And that's always been difficult for me. I look for reassurances. I look for guarantees, and there are none. I mean, the cool thing is because the 1 year position, they said, okay, well, whoever gets this job, your job at the school you're currently at or whatever role you're currently in will be guaranteed. That's cool. That's nice to know that when this year ends, um, I can walk right back into the brick and mortar building that I left, right back into the grade that I was teaching, and just keep going. I like that. That's cool. I may not have applied if it was, no, we're not guaranteeing anything. You'll have to fend for yourself and find a posting to apply to. And if you can't find your position, then we will assign you one. Hey, that's a tough one to swallow. You know, that's tough to swallow for me at this time in my life. I don't want you to tell me where I'm going if I'm not successful posting, but I don't have to. That's not a concern right now. one less thing that my brain has to, because if you think about that whole process starts in like March, April, but you still have work to do. Like imagine next March, my superintendent says, hey, the paperwork's coming out around postings. And since we're putting you back in a classroom, you have some say in like what family of schools you might want to go to or whatever. You need to start filling all that stuff out now. And just to hear that and think, whoa, I still have 4 months of this job and I'm already thinking about September.
Mm-hmm.
I won't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal, like that brain space doesn't have to be devoted to that in my perspective. March will come and I won't have to worry about where I'm going in September. My place has been held for me. But I thought to myself, with any of these 1-year postings, you literally have to start wrapping your head around September in March.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have 4 months of work in your current portfolio. And to be distracted from that is a shame. I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. You're doing something new in September.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to share a little bit about what you're going to be up to?
Sure. I want to land on one more thing, just one more observation, and it's one more observation that I think our many listeners, it may be of value to them. It's the it's a bit of a paradigm shift, and this may not be as prevalent as it used to be, but I think I've still encountered it a few times. I have encountered this a few times. Is that my belief is that in order to grow, you have to be prepared to go to somewhere else in your board. Like that you can take on another committee position within your school. You can, take different AQs to sort of deepen and I was going to say densify, but just to sort of, I guess, deepen and enrich your understanding, math, literacy, ELL strategies, coding, making, what have you, reading. Or you can go somewhere else and just encounter new challenges. And I've mentioned to you before, and I've said to other people, I leave well. Like I'm more trained at leaving jobs within the board than I am in actually staying out of school, because I sort of look at the board. I'm like, okay, I want to have different experiences. I want to, me being on the edge of new things is what kind of keeps the engine well tuned, and also keeps me, I think, energized to do the work as it is. Now, typically I haven't strayed too far from spec ed student success. Like I've always been in that zone. And, there's some people that stay thrilled by remaining a cert for their whole career. And they feel like that's the place that they need to be. I get that. I also know it's not for me. That I've learned to be comfortable with saying yes and just taking on new things and taking a chance. Now, the cost there is that sometimes my roots are shallow. I go as deep as I can with the kids that I'm working with, but leaving and going to new experiences and accumulating new experiences can mean that you don't often get the depth, like that super saturation right down to your roots, where it could change you. I kind of look at it as that the roots end up kind of like locking. I look at it more from as maybe an impediment by staying too long somewhere, that then you sort of feel less nimble to sort of take on new things. And I think from the point of view of the overwhelming philosophy in teaching is it kind of still is get the job, appreciate the security, and stay as long as you can in that one spot. So your example of, and I think you mentioned it, I think you mentioned something about the, after 18 years, you're sort of shifting. You said 18, right? 18 years of sort of classroom teaching.
19.
19 years of classroom teaching. You're sort of taking a chance on yourself here and saying, I want to learn in a different space. So this is not just you contributing to the board. This is you also in enforcing yourself to have to learn new things. And however you see the opportunity now or even into the future is that it has to feed you too, right? And I do believe that I think this is a really great conversation to have about the power of belief in leaving a place as well. Like it's good to go and learn somewhere else. And it's good to have that as part of the possibilities when you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I really want to stay teaching grade 3, 4, whatever, but that's not going to be here. Where could I go to stay in alignment with teaching grade 3 and 4? Do I transfer? Do I move around? I get all the limitations on that. And I get that some people don't have the opportunity. I get that some people, heck, might not even have the car to be able to sort of travel to another school. But I think your example of shifting to a new place on the board to do work, to continue doing work, is I think it's a valid example to keep in the forefront of this, because you're actually not leaving education. You're going to continue doing many of the things that you did in the classroom. You're going to be doing them differently with different kids and teachers and different adults too. My shift isn't as my shift isn't as sort of, let's say, dynamic as yours. Next year, I'll be working with a small crew of students in the technical term for it, I don't know it. I don't know it, but it's a community classroom. It would be considered a community classroom. And sometimes this is called a congregated classroom. But so I'll be working with 6 students, I think. All students are identified with autism, have autism. And we're going to be working on some credits and also some life skills. So the program in itself is for grade 9 and 10 students at our school. So I think there's one student. I think there's one student that will be a grade 10 student. And then the rest, I think, are all new students coming in from grade 8. So that's exciting to me. I'm looking forward to. I was doing the integration period. Integration period at a previous school, teaching hospitality to a small crew of students in a community classroom, which was really fascinating to circle back to that 12 years later in my career, because I hadn't taught culinary in a long time. And now I'm able to do credit bearing. So credit bearing courses for students in a small community classroom. And I'm looking forward to the building new relationships with the families, to looking at inquiry-based learning, to considering community connections. So whether that's field trip or bringing other community members into the classroom to be able to talk to us, connect with us. Looking at helping the students to network and connect with the school widely. And I really do dig working with grade 9 students just in general and helping them on ramp into high school. So there's a whole lot of really cool stuff. I get to dig deeper into my spec ed tools, my learning strategist kind of mindset. So same school, different portfolio, but I'm staying another year. That's staying another year at this school. So that's a good thing too. That's a good thing too.
Does your class or position have a name? Like, do you guys have a name for what you do?
I guess it would just be a community classroom teacher,
Oh, okay.
ASD, community classroom teacher.
So are there different community classrooms?
There are. We have an intensive classroom, so another community classroom, and then we also have an autism classroom non-credit bearing. So those are the 3, and then we have the other spec ed classes. Some schools have multiple exceptionalities. Some schools have have like a developmental disability classroom. So ours, we have the two different versions of the autism community classroom, and then we have the intensive, and then we have the I believe the intensive are it's this students identified mild intellectual disability, so MID identification. So yeah.
That's cool that you get to have that focus. I know our listeners aren't privy to our conversations, but listening to you talk about this work that you're going to be doing next year come to fruition has been pretty cool to listen to you talk about your ideas, and your passion for wanting to do the work is pretty cool. And people aren't getting that flavor here right now because it's just you talking for a few minutes about what you're going to be doing next year. But
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of hours, many more minutes that have gone into you thinking about and communicating with me what this might look like for you next year,
Mm-hmm.
and the different ways that you're going to kind of dive in and really own it. It's pretty cool.
The it's the thing that I gotta do a shout out to Pam Belding. So Pam's someone that I worked with in the Access to Suspension program. And when I left that space, I was going into the community classroom, autistic individuals, teaching them culinary classes. One of the things she said to me, so I'm a messy learner and I'm a divergent teacher. Like I really kind of push outward in a lot of different ways when I teach my classes. I'm grabbing from multiple points of view. I'm always trying to sort of go multimodal within the classroom and check to see, am I hooking every kid? Like I sort of, you're sort of, it's like kites, right? It's like all these different kites in the classroom, trying to keep them all sort of just into the right angle of the wind each time. And one of the things she said to me, and I appreciate this. It'd be cool actually if she decided to listen to our podcast. She mentioned to me, so she would observe how I taught in the it's called Access, in the Access program. And she would always be like, I just don't know how you sort of grab from all these different spaces. And I mean, I had Alt Ed is a good space for me because I like learning different courses, and Alt Ed in general, you have to be like a polymath. Like you have to have an interest in any course, and definitely have a kind of a structured approach to learning so that you can hang on to those bits of courses. So I've had to learn geography and math and science and the arts and tech. Like I have to be able to not only have those resources available, but I have to be able to sort of shift to those quickly in my head as well, because often, and this is just a general rule for me in teaching, is in teaching math, I love drawing in an English example or an arts example. Like I try and always make, one of the things that I aim for always is making whatever I'm teaching sticky, so the kids have a harder time putting it down. And if that means I have to talk about math, but tell a story, I'll tell a story. Or if we have to do history and it's better for us to draw, then we're going to draw. Like we're going to create these different ways to come in. And her watching me teach, she was aware of that. And she was always very appreciative of like how I would constantly shift my POV so that I could be in alignment with the kid and just use a different example to explain something. So that English class, sometimes the kid could walk away like, yeah, like we did math in English class. It was really strange, but I kind of liked how we did the math in English class. Like that's the best kind of feedback that I can get. But she sort of countered that. She gave me a little bit of a caution. She said, you're going to have to be more organized. You're going to have to be more organized when you're going into the structured learning that often becomes the conversation in ASD programming, the structured learning and the sequence, having it the building in transition information, making sure that everything that you would sort of say about teaching in general, but in the ASD programming, and actually it comes from, I think, kindergarten teaching is the structured learning and having, what do those stations look like? What do those tools look like? And I know for me going into that, it was a stretch. I actually dug more into my old chef self, which was highly structured, systematic, process-based writing, outcome-based kind of expectations. Like the goal, start with the goal, the end in mind is kind of always about what culinary is about, because you have to deliver a product. You don't have a choice. Nothing is just practice for practice sakes. You have to serve a meal at the end. So I kind of had to dig back into that. But I always hold that as a really great reminder about about critical feedback from your colleagues, because she knows me, and she also knows how it's not just like she knows me from Twitter. She knows me from seeing me in action. And I think her suggesting that at first, I'm like, oh, come on, Pam, I can do this. But she was hitting truth, right? And she was like, it was a bit of a, make sure you focus on this. Make sure that you get tight on this. Make sure that you are aware of how your dance routine might actually be distracting to some students. So I took that to heart, and I've actually had to scaffold my own teaching to become better at that and still hang on to some of that weird stuff that I do. And what I, in a similar way that she hit me hard with that statement, she hit me hard in the right way, is that working with, there are students in this roster that will tell me directly, stop doing that. Like there's, you could say it's unfiltered, but it's also unadorned. There's students, and this happens frequently in some spec ed spaces, but the nature of the relationship, and sometimes just the nature of spending so much time together, the students tell you straight up, like, this isn't working. And sometimes you notice it in the behavior, that is communication. Sometimes it is verbal communications. Clef, stop talking, I want to work. Okay, I'll do it. And I love that directness that, for me, from my experience, has come out of working in the autism program, is just being told directly, stop, sometimes even shut up, get out of the way, I can't see the board. Your voice is really loud. Your voice hurts my ears. I just love the specificity of it, because it reminds me that my story and how I learn is not my student's story, right? And how I operate in the class is not how my students operate in the class. So I dig that. It's one of my favorite things about this, is just how I've told you about the scroll stoppers, my whole project of reducing my Twitter following. I love this. It's easy for us to just doom scroll in our classroom. Just go about the business, teach as if the lesson is everything, and just go, 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 go. But I find working in spec ed, and often I get a ton of scroll stoppers. It's just like, whoa, you're right. No autopilot here. So
I think I just got the title for this episode. Your
what?
Voice Hurts My Ears.
I've been told that. Your voice hurts my ears. Or you're not told directly. But there were times as well where my son has done this too. Like, he puts his headphones on. Or I've had students do that before. They just pick up their noise canceling headphones, and I could see just from their composure, like, Clough's voice isn't as loud anymore. But this is this is the scroll stopper, right? It keeps you from just going about your business in the usual way. And I find like that's the thing that I need reminders of, and that's the thing that makes me constantly refreshed in education. So
what did you draw today? Dude, it's a plant. It looks like a plant.
Let's see if
it's an orange. Is it an orange?
Not an orange.
Oh, dude, describe it.
But it is orange.
It's orange, and there's roses coming up from it, and roots underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
I know you don't like to talk about your art. Can you tell me, your buddy, what you were thinking when you drew that? Because I don't know what's going on over there, and I'd like to know.
I didn't shift any of my profile pics to represent the orange color, the orange t-shirt. I just kept on kind of inputting, having discussions. sharing resources that I found on social media. So I think in some ways this is just it. I'm thinking about, as we were talking, I'm thinking about, well, as we're talking, I'm thinking about the things that you and I didn't talk about. So this is like the parallel universe podcast picture, and the idea of they're not roses, they're hearts. It's a little bit of green, some growth coming out of the orange, and then but still roots on the bottom. I was thinking about how there's, in some spaces, I've witnessed some really great conversations that seem to be the very beginnings of reconciliation. There's a whole lot of conversations out there that are pushing truth, making sure that truth is kind of forefront. It's actually not done. There's still 2 more parts that I have to put in it. But I am aware of entirely aware of my responsibility for upholding the calls to action that have come out of the TRC, but also been a part of First Nations discussions for a long time. You know, as far as just listen. We can tell you what we want. Just listen. In similar way, you were talking about what you learned from your degree. Just listening is the start, right? And then the action then follows. So I think that's what I was kind of challenging in the drawing. I think it's also, I've seen this before. One of the phrases that has popped up in association with, especially in reference to the residential schools, you may have come across this, and I don't have the exact words, but it has to do with the idea of seeds that being buried. They thought colonialism, power holders, oppressors thought that they were just burying us, and they were not aware that we were planted seeds. So there is right now, there's a very powerful conversation happening now, entirely connected with the trauma and horror of genocide in our in the First Nations communities. So I feel like in some ways, I didn't tributize any of my social media platforms with the orange color. Yes, did I wear it? Have I worn it? Do I continue to wear orange in support? I do, and I think that's where this came out of. That's where this particular drawing came out of. Sometimes I talk about the stuff I draw.
Yes, sometimes you do here, but most of the time on socials, you just post images and you don't say anything. So I know there's a method behind that madness.
Well, I think, I kind of, I think in some ways, if I just think of it as a broader, if we want to make it a broader tactic, I think what I'm doing is just, here's my expression, and then I let you have your reaction. And if you choose to come back and have a conversation about it with me, I'm down for that. It's one of the things that's always kind of interesting is when I'm asked what is the purpose, and you've done this, and I appreciate it. Often others have asked about the pieces that I do, but they never offer their interpretation. And this is one of the funny things I would say about, not a funny thing, and I'm definitely not speaking for all artists, but if I consider myself an artist or a poet, let's say, I put the piece out without the expectation of having to do any more explanation other than the piece. Is that kind of a weird thing to say?
No, it's just
like
how you roll.
Yeah. And I wonder about how other artists are when they put their pieces out into the world, you know, how they perceive their relationship to the piece once they sort of launch it or release it. I think I'm always open to a discussion about the piece as long as it sits in the common space between the viewer's experience and my experience. I'm not always comfortable. I'm growing comfortable with it, but full disclosure, I'm not always comfortable sort of saying what that's inspired that particular piece. I do, because I do have that thinking, but there's something in my brain that kind of goes, and I know this doesn't translate well. I mean, it'll be more easy to see when I scan it and post it up, but I don't always have the, it's not as comfortable for me to talk about what I was thinking when I drew it if the individual is not sharing what they felt when they saw it. It's a funny little feedback loop. And again, I don't know if other artists operate in that same way. Yeah, that's my thinking on that, dude.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Do you feel like that with your videos? Do you have any sense of that with your videos? You make the video and then you put it out there. Do you sort of think to yourself, I hope people more share what they think first, and not think like, hey, that's a really great video, but sort of, wow, that angle that you took the photo from or the video from, that was really cool. How did you get up so high? Or what was that tilt that you did on it? Or are you thinking that conversation is, hey, that's a really great piece? Do you get any sense of do you crave a difference at all? Or do you think about it?
No, I don't think I think about it.
Okay.
I'm thinking about it now. But I don't know.
Well,
you've given me something to focus on now with all my free time.
Yep, summer freestyle. All right, what was this? This was summer school session 1, but episode 41, season 4.
Crazy that season 4 has hit 41 episodes.
Yeah, Decoded Podcast. Soon to be the Decoded Podcast coffee table book.
Right.
That's going to be cool.
That would be kind of cool.
It will be. Shipping early September.
Send us your money now.
Send us your money now. In the least, Chids, you'll get the copy. I'll get the copy. In the least.
Okay, well, have a great day and week.
You too. I'm down for, I could probably be down for some Fortnite later if you're still feeling like you need to burn that out of your system.
It's fun. It's funny, over the last couple of weeks, I've not played a lot of Fortnite.
Me neither. I've been watching my kids enjoy it, but I have not either. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Cheers, dude. Peace. Have a great day.
You too. See ya.